Welcome back to the Hip Replacement Podcast. I'm Chris Bystriansky, your host. I've also had both of my hips replaced, one more than 10 years ago and the other one more than 12 years ago, and I'm here to share my experiences with you. Okay, today, this is going to be an adult topic. So I'm going to give you about 10 seconds to clear everyone else out of the room or clear them out of the car so that you can listen to this without embarrassing somebody or getting embarrassed. Okay, so 10 seconds to clear everyone else out or turn it off, and you can come back and listen to it at a different time. So if you have your kids, your parents, maybe your pastor in the room or the car with you, now is the perfect time to turn off this episode. Okay, tick tock, tick tock, tick tock. And now I'm going to assume that if you're still here listening, you're in a place where you can listen without getting embarrassed because someone else can hear what you're listening to. All right. So here we go. Today, we're going to talk about intercourse after a hip replacement surgery. I'm not sure if anyone else is talking about this, but we're going to do it right here. And obviously, this is going to be from a man's perspective, me. And I can assure you, I've done extensive research on this topic. Now, it's going to be from my perspective, from a man. So I cannot speak about the specifics for the women. But ladies, hold on here. Send me a message with your comments or insights using the link in the show notes, and I'll read your comments in another episode, okay? I won't read your name, so it can be relatively anonymous. I mean, I won't broadcast who you are if you send in comments. So, and also, if you want to appear as a guest on the podcast to talk about this topic, send me a comment about that as well. I'm looking forward to getting your comments because I'd love to hear your perspective, because this is really, in intercourse, could possibly stretch those hips and really be pretty active physically. So I'd love to hear your comments and what works and what doesn't work for you. Okay. Last chance to leave this episode or save it for a different time when you're in a better place where others can't hear this. All right, here we go. Whatever you want to call it. Intercourse, sex, hanky-panky, getting laid, shag, root, bonk, whatever. Obviously, this is a physical activity. I'm not saying that it's not emotional or psychological, but for the purposes of this episode, I'm going to address the physical piece only, all right? But because it's physical, obviously check with your surgeon about when it's safe to return to sex or intercourse, all right? I've read that about 6 to 8 weeks is appropriate, but it's all relative, right? Not all intercourse is created equal. If you typically engage in intercourse gently, you may be ready sooner rather than someone who's a little more aggressive. So if you engage in intercourse more actively or aggressively, like the bed is shaking or bouncing or hitting the wall, okay, maybe take a little more time than that 6 to 8 weeks that they're suggesting before you jump into that high of an activity level. Perfect time to start gently and then accelerate as your body allows. Let me bring up just a few general observations or words of caution here, all right? Check with your surgeon, all right? Everybody's different. Everyone's going to heal at a different pace, so check with your surgeon before you engage in this type of activity. Start slowly. Obviously, the healthier, the more flexible you are, the more you can engage in intercourse and get more aggressive with it. So having more and better intercourse, to me, is a great motivator to take care of our health, all right? I think the sex drive is stronger if we're healthier, if we're well hydrated, if we're just have a healthier physical body. Our sex drive is going to be a little bit better, and we may feel more confident in doing what we're doing, okay? So take care of yourselves, get more active, get stronger, get more flexible. And all of these will help improve the intercourse activity for you. Okay, so as a man who's had hip replacement surgeries, what was my experience like? And I had 2 hips done 18 months apart in the anterior approach, so where they went through the front of the hips. So what was it like for me with that situation? Well, before I had the hip replacement surgeries, and long before, when I was very active, I was very active. Me and my wife were very active sexually long before I started to have hip pain. And then it kind of got less and less as the hip pain became more and more severe. And I was limited in what I could do. I mean, I had really pain in my hips. I couldn't stand for very long. I was limited in the positions I could get into. I mean, a little bit of the good news is that, you can have sex or intercourse laying down, but still there were certain positions with that where it would hurt to do that for a long time, whether that was thrusting into my wife when she was on her back. But even as the pain became more and more, it was still great. Don't get me wrong, but it could have been better if I wasn't in pain most of the time. Okay. And then some of the things that I was concerned about after I had the hip implant, or I was thinking about, after I have the hip surgeries, what are some of the concerns I'm going to have regarding sex? And some of those were, would I move the implant? How long was it going to be? But then was I going to move the implant? Would I be able to regain the flexibility that I had before so I could do this and have a good time doing it? And can I physically do it? And what would that even look like? Okay, could I physically have sex the way I wanted to have sex? And what would that look like? But after the hip implant, after the surgeries, we waited maybe about 3 months. I know the doctors, maybe they said 6 to 8 weeks. I'm a little overly cautious, so we waited, and 3 months about before returning to gentle intercourse. Gentle, right? And the safest and most comfortable position for me to start having intercourse after the hip replacement surgery was me and my wife on the floor, both kneeling, and me behind my wife on the floor. Not on a bed, on the floor. And we did that for a while. And over time, as I got stronger and more confident and more flexible, we were able to do that a little more aggressively, if you will. And then we were able to change positions, like getting back into being on a bed with my wife on her back and me on top of her. Now, with the type of surgery I had, the anterior approach, if I'm on top of my wife and my wife is on her back, it's me thrusting into her and really stretching the front of my hips. So we had to be a little bit careful, but over time that was something that we were able to do. But honestly, frankly, the bed is kind of like the most boring place to have sex, honestly. So the floor was a great option. And then over time, we were able to really return to a lot more positions with, for example, my wife being on top of me. So I would be on my back with my wife being on top of me. I'd be on my back on the floor or on a chair, and my wife would be on top of me. Now, my wife's not very big. She's pretty petite, but still, with her on top of me over a long period of time and her hips rubbing up against my hips, my hips initially would get sore. They don't get sore anymore, so that's great. And it would be the same thing as if I were laying on the floor, the same situation as me laying on the floor or on a bed or even sitting on a chair. Me on a chair with my wife on top of me is like the best. I just feel like a superhero at that point. Maybe you have your own favorite way to do it, and hopefully you can get back to that point as quickly as possible. But just be careful and go at your pace. But after a few years, we were gentle. her on top of me behind her, yada, yada, yada. After a few years, there were basically no limitations that we had. I mean, I didn't feel any pain. There was no limitations on twisting, stretching, squatting, bending, wife on top of me. Everything was available to us, and we used it. I'm proud to say quite frequently. So it was great to engage in that and not be sore. I didn't have any concerns about moving or damaging the hips. And what I mean by the period of time, I would say that no concerns. It took me maybe 2 years. But again, we were pretty active and pretty maybe aggressive, you call it, but we would get after it. Okay. So there would be some times at the beginning where I was a little bit sore, but after about 2 years, I didn't really have any concerns about hurting anything, breaking anything, doing any damage, moving anything. And, there's no soreness or concerns about positions after about 2 years up until today. More than 12 years later, there's been no concerns about the flexibility. And honestly, I'm able to get into positions now that I haven't been able to get into positions for 20 years. All right. So I kind of turned back the clock on our sex life by having the hip replacement surgeries and recovering, because there's just some positions, trust me, I can't demonstrate it here. But there's just some positions that I can get into because I've regained a lot of the flexibility, and hopefully you can too. And I'm sure my wife enjoys the flexibility as well. So just a couple key points. Check with your surgeon. All right. Start slowly. Get healthier. Get as healthy as you can. I mean, even a little bit helps. Get back to an active and happy life and a happy sex life. I mean, it could be, consider this. Having sex or intercourse, I mean, what a great exercise and therapy after a hip replacement once your body's healed a little bit, because of the movements and the stretching and the overall motivation to take care of ourselves. If we assume that if we get healthier, if we follow the thought that if we get healthier and we're stronger, more flexible, and that leads to more or better sex, I mean, what a great motivator to take care of our health, right? So yeah, I encourage you to do that. And, if not for the intercourse, then just for the purpose of getting healthier overall to begin with. So what to do? Go grab your spouse or significant other and try out a few of these things and see what works for you and build on it from there. All right. So let this be a gauge of, hey, how much have I recovered? How much flexibility have I regained? How strong have I gotten? If you're relatively short after surgery, 6 months or whatever, see where you are. And then as time goes by, see if you're getting more flexible and better, and you can engage in more. I don't know if you want to call it exciting or aggressive or whatever type of intercourse, but just let there be a measure of, oh, I couldn't do this a year ago, or I couldn't do this 6 months ago, or I couldn't get in this position a while ago, but now I can. So use that as a ruler or measuring guide to help you determine if you're getting healthier and better and you're able to enjoy these things more. All right. So I hope this was helpful. Kind of a difficult subject to talk deeply on, but I'm not aware of anywhere else that talks about this. And I know this was just from a man's perspective, but ladies, please remember, send in your comments about what works for you, and you can use the link in the show notes. So you just go to the link and it'll take you to the podcast website and at the bottom of the podcast website, there is a place to contact us and leave comments. So please do that. This is part 1 of intercourse, and hopefully we'll have part 2 with the women's perspective that I will be able to share with you soon. I hope this is helpful, and thanks so much for tuning into the Hip Replacement Podcast. And until next time, I wish you the best recovery possible. Take care.